The Legions of Athena. Chapter 12. Back in suite number 7, everyone was making themselves comfortable. With unlimited food, a cozy room, and the best seats in the stadium, it was hard to get any more comfy. I know we were chased out of our homes and nearly killed on several occasions, but this trip has had its upsides, Hedger said, slurping on a banana smoothie. I'll say. Rollo would have been so jealous. He loved these festivals, agreed Max. Rollo, you mean that scrawny kid back in the army? Good with a gun? Rex asked. Wasn't he your bunkmate? Yup, and a bit of a Theseus fan. He used to tape all the Labyrinth challenges and watch them repeatedly, Max said. Never did like that, Rollo, Rex mumbled. Labyrinth challenges? Mia asked. Oh, you don't know, Maximus began to explain. It's the most famous event of the festival. You know how the entire Minotaur race has a grudge against Theseus, right? Rex let out an angry snort, but Maximus ignored him. Well, the Labyrinth challenge is like the official stage to settle that score. Every 3 years, during the festival, around 10 Minotaur warriors are put into a large maze called the Labyrinth and pitted against the champion. 10 against 1. That sounds a bit unfair, Mia said. Hedger snickered. Maybe for the Minotaurs, considering that Theseus is still alive and the event has been going on for over 30 years. Wait, these fights are to the death? Mia asked, horrified. Yeah, and we wouldn't have it any other way, Rex replied. It's considered a great honor to fight and even die for the pride of our race. If you find honor in dying, there is something very wrong with your race, commented Hedger. Rex started muttering about breaking his stupid pigeon neck. In any case, Theseus has never lost, and I think this is the 11th Labyrinth challenge. 11th? That means he's killed about 100 Minotaurs, Mia exclaimed, amazed. And many more outside the arena, Rex said. They don't call him the Minotaur Slayer for nothing, and the challengers are reducing in number every year. Heard they got only 8 this year. Rex? Maximus said, a bit worried. You're not planning to try your luck again, are you? Rex shook his head. You don't gotta worry about me. I may be hot-headed, but I'm not stupid. I've learned my lesson, and it's gonna take more than just this new arm to take down that monster. Maximus had heard a lot of tales of how Theseus ravaged Martian soldiers in the battlefield. When Minotaurs started calling someone a monster, that was not someone you would want to encounter. Achilles returned after a while. Maximus was sure he had acted on the voice's warning. Even though he badly wanted to know, he couldn't ask in front of everybody. Since Achilles did not offer an answer, he felt that it was a topic best left untouched. About half an hour later, they were deafened by the loud sounds of trumpets. The Panathenea festival was about to begin. They all took their seats to get a complete view of the arena. The Colosseum, a large circular stadium that was able to house over 80,000 viewers. Not even a single seat was vacant. People from different races and countries and all walks of life had gathered to witness the grand opening of the festival. Even the loud trumpet noises were deafened by the crowds cheering as a large stage began to rise at the north end of the Colosseum. Fireworks burst in the sky. Loud music and dances followed till the stage had completely risen and revealed itself. A 300-member orchestra began playing the Minervian national anthem. Almost the entire stadium fell quiet, with most of the people standing and singing along to their anthem. Maximus was amazed by the patriotism the people had for their country. This was definitely not the case in Mars. Citizens obeyed out of fear rather than respect. He remembered when the Martian national anthem used to be played in the trenches, barely anyone would be listening. They would be lucky if some drunk wasn't puking at the time. After the anthem, a portly man took over the stage. The stage itself was decorated elegantly, filled with white pillars with olive branches creeping onto it and sculptures of owls with their wings spread out. The man adjusted the microphone and began speaking. Maximus recognized him from the banquet. He was as Athena's assistant, Dalton. Soon he began to speak. Good afternoon, one and all. Welcome to the prestigious triennial Panathenea Festival. Before we commence, allow me to first invite our just and glorious ruler to the stage. I present to you our queen, Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Athena walked onto the stage, tall and graceful as ever. She wore a long flowing white gown with a very light print of olive leaves done in silver that would have made a bride envious. She had her hair tied into a complex bun and wore a simple platinum necklace along with an elegant matching tiara. She was also flanked by 2 men on either side. Accompanying her on the stage is none other than the leader of the Minervian army, our very own General Odysseus and the champion of Athens, Theseus. Dalton continued. The 3 especially powerful individuals stepped onto the stage and waved and smiled at the crowd who clearly loved them. Half of Dalton's words were drowned by the loud cheering of the crowd. Athena came forward and sat on one of the 4 large chairs placed in the center of the stage. Maximus expected Odysseus and Theseus to take the seats beside her, but they did not. Instead, Theseus went ahead and stood behind Athena like a bodyguard. Odysseus, on the other hand, smiled and waved for a bit more and left the stage entirely. This did quip Max's curiosity as to who the other 3 seats were for. Dalton began to speak again. It was a long and tedious speech. He spoke about the history of Athens, its glory, and so on. Nearly 2 minutes in, not a soul was paying attention, but Dalton seemed genuinely unaware of this. He kept at his well-rehearsed words like a donkey pulling an empty cart. Luckily, Maximus and the others did not have to sit around listening to it. Instead, they decided to get more acquainted with the food counter. Even Achilles had begun meditating again. The doors opened and Odysseus entered along with Daedalus. He took one look outside and said, "In the name of Hades, is that man still going on?" Odysseus said, clearly annoyed. "Every year, I tell him to keep his bloody speech short, and every year he ignores me." Achilles opened his eyes and said, "Are you not needed with the goddess?" "What for?" "Our duties have been dealt with, and Theseus is there in case of any unexpected events," Odysseus said, taking the seat beside Achilles. Daedalus, on the other hand, joined Maximus in making a sandwich. "Try the lamb deer. It is cooked to perfection," Daedalus recommended to Mia, carving up a large piece for himself. "No thanks, I'm vegetarian," she said politely. "Oh yes, you're a nature magic user," Daedalus said with a smile. "Channeling the energy of nature does require a strict diet, which is why I prefer runes and spell circles. Never could go a week without bacon." While Maximus could only think about how Daedalus managed to get his weekly bacon, when the only food he had ever seen in the castle was colored goop, Mia seemed excited. "Do you practice?" she asked. "Magic?" "No, my dear. I'm afraid that does require a certain degree of skill one has to be born with," Daedalus said. "But I do enjoy dabbling in the art of alchemy." Mia nodded to this. "I've never met an alchemist before. Heard it's a hard trade to master." Daedalus chuckled and said, "Oh, I am no master, my dear, but I do find it useful." He then revealed the necklace he was wearing, which was filled with oddly shaped rocks and pendants. It also had a small metal cube in the center. "Why, just the other day this little trinket helped me to counter a rather unexpected sleep spell." Soon the two of them started talking about crystals and transmutation circles, none of which Maximus understood. So he decided to move over to something more his taste, and began stuffing his face with pastries along with Hedger. From outside, the crowd began to cheer again. Dalton had finally stepped down and made way for the next speaker, Goddess Athena. She waited until the crowd settled and said, "Thank you, Honorable Dalton, for those enlightening words. Now, on my personal behalf, let me welcome one and all to the Panathenaea Festival." The crowd roared again with joy. "Now, to make this event even more auspicious, we have a few very special guests joining us this year," continued Athena. "Please allow me to welcome them on stage." The crowd settled down, and a soft murmur began to rise in the arena. "First of all, may I present to you an ambassador from the country of Venus, a lady whose fame precedes her and is renowned for her beauty. I give you Helen of Troy." The crowd went wild as a slender figure walked onto the stage. The lady in the flowing green and gold gown walked elegantly towards Athena and greeted her with a kiss on each cheek. As the cameras focused on the newcomer and showcased her face across the giant screens, the only thing that passed through Max's head was, holy crap, was she hot. Her face was perfection, with dough-shaped blue eyes that seemed to shimmer as she smiled with her light pink lips. Her high cheekbones made her seem almost sculpted. Her bright blonde hair that almost seemed to be made of actual strands of gold were straight till the edges where they formed light waves and rested on her shoulders. Maximus used to wonder how one woman could cause the entire Trojan War, but now he kind of understood. A sharp punch from Mia brought him back to reality. "What did you do that for?" Max asked. "Oh, you were just about to drool all over the floor just now," she retorted in annoyance. "Thought I'd save you from the embarrassment," she said. She then stormed off before Maximus could say anything, not that he could have, as he was still distracted by Helen. He then turned to Hedger and Rex and said, "Talk about a real beauty, huh, guys?" "Really," Rex said, "but she's so thin, one punch and she'd break like a twig if you ask me." "She's not that bad," added Hedger, "but her hair does remind me of pasta." "Hey, you think they have pasta here?" Maximus stared at the two of them and mumbled, "I need more human friends." A few feet away, Achilles was glaring at the stage with dislike. "So she's here as well?" he said. "The face that launched 1,000 ships," said Odysseus, "and now advisor and apprentice to goddess Aphrodite, along with her husband acting as champion." Achilles closed his eyes to meditate again. Seeing her awakened old memories. He was afraid that it might give rise to something far worse. "Are you all right, old friend?" Odysseus inquired. Achilles opened his eyes to see a look of concern on the general's face, and he felt a pang of guilt for making his old comrade worry. Odysseus had enough on his plate without one of his outbreaks. Achilles forced a smile and said, "Not my favorite celebrity, I am afraid." "Neither mine," Odysseus admitted with a weary smile. "But at least you didn't have to greet her with flowers like I did. Another perk of being general." Daedalus had just come over and sat beside them with a bunch of bananas. "Why so gloomy, you both? It's a festival. At least try to have fun," advised the inventor. He then handed each of them a banana. "All that food on the table and you chose bananas?" Odysseus asked incredulously. "Oh yes, bananas are a favorite of mine, high on potassium and they taste great. Some cultures even use them as a unit of measurement," replied Daedalus. Achilles decided to accept the old inventor's advice, but declined the fruit. Helen had taken one of the seats on stage. Athena began to speak again. "Next we have an ambassador from the Neptune Seas and its capital of Atlantis, the general of the mighty Admiral Poseidon's naval fleet, Triton." The crowd seemed much less responsive when the blue-skinned merman stepped onto the stage than when Helen had appeared. Triton seemed even less happy to be there. He had a scowl on his face and didn't even bother to greet Athena. He headed straight for his seat. He still had his large conch-shaped gauntlet on his left arm, which rested on his lap. Once the soft but polite applause had ended, Athena began to speak again. Finally, we have a very special guest this year for the festival. It is truly rare for the city of Athens to host a fellow Olympian god among us, but I am delighted to say that this year we have such an honor. Without any further delay, please welcome a god that needs no introduction, Apollo. The crowd went insane at these words. There erupted applause and effusive shouts of greeting the sun god, but no one came onto the stage, and slowly the applause started to fade, out seeing as no one had appeared yet. There was a puzzled murmur in the crowd. Suddenly, flash. A large, bright white flash of light had engulfed the entire stadium, blinding everyone within it. Once the light had dissipated and people began to regain their sense of sight, they saw a man floating in midair at the center of the stadium. They say the expression "the body of a god" came into use with Apollo in mind, and with good reason too. The only word truly capable of describing him was perfection. Every curve and every muscle on his body seemed to be molded flawlessly. His face somehow managed to look gentle and exotic at the same time. His eyes had golden pupils, his hair was long, wavy, and stroked back up to his shoulders. The bleach blonde hair seemed to move slightly in the wind, but never really getting tousled. He wore khaki pants and a fluffy white full-sleeve shirt with the top 3 buttons opened to reveal his smooth and chiseled chest. Even his clothes fluttered in the wind, making the sight of him even more exquisite. He slowly descended down to the stage and greeted Athena with a slight bow and kissed the hand she offered for a handshake. Then he turned to the crowd and raised his hand in greeting, and the crowd loved it. "Look who's drooling now," Maximus teased. Mia finally tore away her stare from the sun god and mumbled, "Oh, shut up." The explosion of cheering continued, till Apollo took a seat beside Helen. The entire crowd still had their eyes transfixed on the stage, but Maximus, on the other hand, was watching his mentor from the corner of his eye. He could feel that Achilles wasn't his calm self now, even though his face showed no indication of this. He, however, instinctively grabbed onto his metallic knee a little too tight. Odysseus seemed to be thinking along the same lines as Max as he was quick to offer his old comrade a drink, which Achilles accepted with a clearly forced smile. "Don't worry, I haven't grown fangs yet," Achilles said half-jokingly. But Maximus felt there was something more to it. The rest of the ceremony was an event none of them would ever forget. The first was a play that depicted the birth of the city of Athens, and various other important events of Minervian history as well. The play ended with an enactment of the great battle between Athena and Arachne. Arachne had many names while she was still alive, the most common of these being the Weaver, or the Spider Queen. Centuries ago, when Athens was still a young city, Arachne was a very powerful and influential witch. Her power was so great that people began to say that it could even rival the gods. Whether or not these claims held any truth, Arachne and her ever-growing followers believed it blindly, so much so that the Spider Queen began boasting that she would be a better ruler for Minerva than Athena. Soon, a civil war broke out within the country. But it was not a long war, as boasting of possessing godly powers and having actual godly powers was not the same. The war ended in a month with Athena personally ending Arachne's life on the battlefield. Today this battle is often retold as a children's fairy tale, but the war is replaced by a weaving contest between the two, and Arachne's death is replaced with her being turned into a spider. Athena had earned the name the goddess of war after this. Not only had she crushed her opposition with entirely, she did so without even losing a single battle during the war. Various musical gigs follow the play. Talented dancers representing dance forms from various corners of the world entertained the audience further. Odysseus had left by then, as he was part of the next event. It was common for countries to showcase their military strength during a festival, and Athens was no different. This would be even more crucial at the time of war, as the morale of the country depended on it. The Minervian army had 8 legions, each one specialized in a certain form of combat. This varied from infantry to armored tank platoons. Maximus remembered being briefed on this back in the army, but he had never paid much attention. Maximus had never been to the front lines. Unlike Rex, he had spent most of his time stationed in remote outposts or in the capital. He had been in battles, but not a full-fledged war. Therefore, learning about the Minervian forces was not a priority. But he had recently discovered that the 8th Legion commanded by Icarus was the Athenian Air Force. Soon drums began to roll a tune Maximus was familiar with. It was the tone he had marched along to, back in the barracks. He expected soldiers to come marching through the gates, but nothing happened. Then, high up in the sky, something streaked past the arena, visible only for a few seconds: the Athenian Air Force, the single most feared air unit in the continent, and probably the greatest advantage Minerva had in the war against Mars. Even though the helicopters didn't stop, they did drop something into the arena. As they got closer, Max realized they were people with large bags on their backs. At first he thought they were parachutes, but then, "Jetpacks," Hedger shouted as the men began to whirl around in the sky. They danced around flawlessly as Daedalus chuckled, saying, "Designed them myself. Couldn't let Icarus have all the fun." After some flawless aerial maneuvering, they all landed in a synchronized pattern along the side of the arena as the announcer shouted, "The 8th Legion." The other legions followed. The 7th Legion, the heavy vehicle division. Rows of tanks and armored trucks entered the arena. The 6th Legion, these consisted of the medical and engineering officers of the army. The 5th Legion, the cavalry and scouts. They rode in on lighter vehicles such as the jeeps and motorcycles. The 4th Legion, the vanguard. These were the soldiers specifically trained for the front lines, the army's first line of defense. The 3rd Legion, the special forces. These were the elite forces, the creme de la creme, chosen and trained for special missions. The 2nd Legion, the infantry unit. These were the foot soldiers of the army and the largest of the legions by far. All the legions took their scheduled places within the arena. By now, the entire arena was nearly full. Only a wide path connecting the entrance to the main stage remained vacant. Then the presenter announced, and finally the 1st Legion of Athena, the gatekeeper unit. Through the main gates, the final legion entered. But instead of the clamor of vehicles or the chant of soldiers, there was a large thud heard throughout the arena as the 1st Legion stepped into the arena. For what entered were no less than 18 humanoid war machines that even towered over the tanks. They were walking behemoths, nearly 20 foot tall and made of iron and bronze. They slowly marched forth towards the stage to the cheers and adulation of the crowd. Each one held a spear the size of a lamppost in one hand, and their other hand had been converted to what could only be described as a cannon. Their headpieces were shaped like the helmets of the Minervian soldiers. Of the 18 metal giants that had marched in, 15 were identical and walked in 3 rows of 5 machines each. These were led by 3 more, but with slight variations. The one to the left was smaller in size and did not have a cannon for a hand, and its spear seemed a bit longer, but it did have 2 smaller guns protruding from its shoulders. The one to the right, on the other hand, had neither a gun nor a spear. In fact, it was down on all fours and was designed like a dog, a giant metal dog with blades for teeth, that is. Then there was the one leading the pack. It was slightly larger than the others, and its armor seemed thicker. It held the spear in one hand and a large shield in the other instead of the cannon. It too had shoulder-mounted guns similar to the smaller version. Unlike the others, it also seemed to have a blue tinge to its armor that seemed familiar to Maximus. "Is that Odysseus?" he asked, surprised, and Achilles nodded. "What in Gaia's name are those things, automatons?" Hedger asked. "Not quite, but I can see why you would think so," Daedalus said with a twinkle in his eyes. "After all, these were designed after the automaton blueprints I received from Hephaestus. Very expensive blueprints, I might add. But this is a rather altered piece of machinery, you see. An upgrade, one might say, though Hephaestus may disagree due to the addition of the human factor," explained the old inventor, chuckling to himself. "But simply put, these are the finest Minerva has to offer," he continued. "Manually enforced combat-heavy automatons, or mechas for short. Any soldier worth his salt knows about your damn mechas," Rex said. 5 years ago, when the war between Mars and Minerva first began, Ares clearly had the upper hand. While Athena was able to counter the sheer numbers of the Martian forces with her brilliant tactics, she was still losing, because of the clearly superior weapons in Ares' arsenal, mainly the ram tanks. Having faced a ram tank personally and come out alive within an inch, Maximus knew exactly how devastating the vehicle was. "These mechas were their answer to that," Rex continued. "One of these could easily handle an entire tank battalion." "What? An entire ram battalion?" Max asked, shocked. A ram battalion usually consisted of 3 to 5 ram tanks along with a few lighter support vehicles and infantry units. Taking down one of those was preposterously hard. "Yes, very true. The mechas did balance the war effort, but sadly they had a fatal flaw," Daedalus said. "Energy." When the rest of the group gave him a confused look, he began to explain. "Well, you see, the mecha units are powered by specialized energy cells known as the quantum core. These quantum cores can only be recharged by the quantum reactors situated within the city, the same reactors that power the Aegis Wall." "I still don't see the problem," said Mia. "Ah, well, you see, my dear, the mecha units require an exorbitant amount of energy, and once that is depleted, they are just, well, oversized hood ornaments," Hedger completed. "Precisely," Daedalus said with a weary smile. "In order to replenish their cores, they must be returned to the city, which is not an easy task. Therefore, the units are in a way chained to the surroundings of the city itself." Mia let out a low whistle and said, "Well, that sucks." "This should give you an idea why the war is in stalemate," Achilles pointed out. "Ares is able to push past the boundaries with ease. But once they reach near the capital city, they have to deal with the mechas," Maximus concluded. Daedalus nodded to this. "Precisely. It is also because of this reason they are called the gatekeeper unit, as they literally guard the gates of Athens." As Maximus watched the giant mecha units salute the goddess Athena, it dawned on him just how impregnable the city of Athens really was. This has been a chapter from Book 2 of the new World Odyssey Series, The Legions of Athena. Links to the books in the bio. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next chapter.